So yeah, this one is definitely going to get demonetized. Hello nitwits and Happy New Year. I think. Hopefully I'm getting this up in time. We're starting a video by saying Happy New Year is still a normal thing to do, but that said, on the off chance that my ADHD has gotten the better of me and I'm a little late on this, then hello nitwits and Happy Valentine's Day. My name is Willie Muse, ringing in 2022 with my co-host Nicholas. And we're still early on in this video, so I don't want to trigger the demonetization bots by talking about it too much, but let's just say that today things are going to get a little bit SCXE. More about that later though, because right now I've got a little bit of housekeeping to do, and that housekeeping is to say thank you guys. Truly and sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. 2021 was the best terrible year of my life, and it's due in large part to you guys watching the stuff I put out and being really nice about it. So thank you so much. Making this show is the first time in a long time I've felt anything that's mildly resembling pride, and that's due in large part to you guys having such a positive response to it. Don't get me wrong, there's still quite a bit of shame mixed in there, but pride is a part of it sometimes now, and that's pretty cool. And granted, I still get a lot of those voices in my head telling me I'm terrible and stupid and everyone hates me and I should give up, but having a bunch of very nice strangers telling me that maybe that's not the case makes those voices a lot easier to drown out and keep going. So I genuinely thank you. I could not do this without you guys. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, my 2021 kinda ended with a bang. My last video did really well, and though that means that it got a copyright claim in France for some reason, it also means that it got a lot more views than I normally get. And so hopefully that means a lot of you watching this are new viewers. So if you are, then welcome. I mean, I guess there's a chance that none of the new people who watched my last video were willing to come back for more because those voices in my head I just talked about are right and I'm terrible and everything I create is bad, but I feel like I should probably just ignore those mean thoughts for now and operate under the assumption that that's not the case, because the new year is all about hope and stuff. Giving up is for February. This will also give me the opportunity to try and explain what exactly this series is all about, because I feel like a lot of you might not entirely get what I'm doing here, because Well, I barely understand myself when I talk, so the idea that any of you have a single clue what I'm rambling about on here feels unimaginable to me sometimes. Basically, I'm on a quest to find my own bad movie. I really like talking about media that's so bad it's good, but I don't want to keep talking about the same movies that so many other channels and podcasts have already covered before, because that's no fun. And let's be honest, I'm a little bit late to this game, so all of the good ones have already been taken. As fun as movies like Fateful Findings, A Talking Cat, and The Room are to talk about, they've already been talked about to death by other people who aren't me, and so there's really no point in talking about them unless I can come up with some amazing, interesting new take. Truth told, a lot of the fun of videos like this is being introduced to crazy new corners of the world. So for me to do this right, I need to talk about a movie that not a lot of people have talked about already. And in order to do that, I need to find one for myself. Of course, then the question becomes, how do I find such a movie? Because if it were easy to do, then it would probably have already been found by other people. Because let's be honest, I move slow. Normally, when I've made these, I've had some sort of guideline I set for myself, which made picking a movie a lot easier, but I didn't have one of those this time around because I wasn't actually planning on making this video. Like I said, I'm kind of scrambling to get this video together in order to strike while the iron is hot, but unfortunately, because I am so very slow at making the things that I make, that iron is cooling a little more with each passing minute. And so to make sure I get this thing out before the algorithm completely forgets who I am, I have decided to take a bit of a shortcut when picking the bad movie I'm going to talk about today. Basically, I'm going to cheat. Like I said, talking about movies like A Talking Cat, Fateful Findings, and The Room would just be unnecessary retreads of things that other people have already done a lot better than I ever could. But what if I could use those movies as jumping off points to find new movies to talk about? With that in mind, I decided to see if anybody who made popular bad movies had made anything else that I could talk about, and as it turned out, they had. Well, kind of. If we're being honest, most bad movies I could think of were kind of one-and-done situations, unfortunately, although in doing research for this, I did find out that Tommy Wiseau actually does have a second movie that he directed, but weirdly, it's a documentary about homelessness in America that appears to have won awards. So that's probably not a great topic for a video like this. Still, while most classic bad movies I could think of weren't part of a larger oeuvre, I did manage to find one director who seems to have made more bad movies than Jesus. Which I guess actually isn't that hard because Jesus wasn't really a filmmaker. Also, I imagine if he were a filmmaker, his movies would probably be pretty decent because he's like magic and stuff. Whatever though, you know what I mean. It's a figure of speech. When I went to the IMDb page of David DeCoteau, the man behind the movie A Talking Cat, I was delighted and mildly disturbed to learn that the director had 176 credits to his name, and they all appeared to be varying degrees of bad. After some digging, I came across a movie called 1313 Giant Killer Bees that caught my eye. Not sure why, but something about this poster made me think that a lot of people are going to be interested in clicking on this video. I don't know, I think it might be the typeface. And since I've been rambling a lot more than usual this time around, I think I should just get the ball rolling by watching this movie and starting my discussion. As always, I'll come back at the end to let you guys know if it's bad, if it's fun, and if I learned a lesson along the way. So, yeah, I'll be back. Okay, that was weird, but let's talk about it. I think enough time has passed that I can say this without getting demonetized now, so let's get sexy. That felt weird to say, I'm sorry. I feel like you can get a good sense of the level and thought and care that director David DeCoteau puts in to the things that he puts out into the world by the fact that his profile picture on IMDb is from the No Hate campaign. Like for as much as I appreciate the sentiment, gay marriage has been legal for quite a few years at this point, so I feel like maybe he should update that one. According to IMDb, his works include such classics as Santa's Summer House, 90210 Shark Attack, and Bigfoot vs. D.B. Cooper. And based solely on those titles, I feel like we can safely assume that this dude isn't really trying to make high art here. Granted, Bigfoot vs. D.B. Cooper sounds good as hell, but trust me when I say that based on the movies of his that I've seen, I feel pretty confident in saying that it's not. Like I said, according to his IMDb page, he's made 176 things, which is just like insane to me. Like for reference, I've made like 4 things in my life, and that almost killed me. And truth told, the things I make are a lot simpler with way less moving parts than the stuff he makes. And depending on the commenter you ask, my stuff is just as bad. His movies spanned a wide range of genres, from family comedies and holiday movies to horror and erotica, and based solely on the sheer volume of what he's been able to create, it's kind of hard for me not to respect him on some level. That said, for as impressive as I find his output, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't just a little bit perplexed by it too. Like, DeCoteau is clearly trying to flood a bunch of markets, but for the life of me, I do not know what those markets are, because I do not have the slightest clue who in the hell could possibly be watching these movies. There was a point midway through watching this where I got worried that maybe it had been made as a part of some Jeffrey Epstein-esque human trafficking scheme that I had accidentally supported, because that would honestly explain this movie way more than the idea that someone made it thinking it would be a legitimate piece of entertainment. If I were to guess its intended purpose, I would say that it's probably meant to be something you're supposed to touch yourself to, because for all intents and purposes, I do believe it is meant to be porn, but that said, if that is the case, then it's not very good porn. Granted, I wouldn't say that I'm like a connoisseur of feature-length pornography, so I guess I don't really know what qualifies as good, but I feel very confident in saying that this ain't it. Like using this movie as a tool for masturbation to me is kind of tantamount to like using a hammer as a tool to bake a cake. Like maybe you could find a use for it in some way, but it probably wouldn't ever be the first thing anyone goes for. I feel like in most scenarios where you find it useful, you're probably better off just using your hands. And to be clear, when I say it's porn, I do not mean it's explicit, because it is not. Like it's like porn in that there are large portions of the movie that clearly only exist for the purposes of sexually arousing the audience, but I genuinely believe that I could show you literally any moment of this film and not violate YouTube's policies, because nothing all that dirty ever actually happens. I would almost say that it's kind of like the porn version of one of those mockbusters, only instead of tricking people into paying money thinking they're about to see a Transformer movie, it's tricking people into paying money thinking they're about to see a dong, which, like if that is actually their intent, then in my eyes, this movie is actually a lot sleazier than it would be were it just a straight up hardcore pornography. But yeah, I feel like if I had to guess the target audience for this movie, I'd say it's probably like a teenager who doesn't know any better, whose parents are out of the house for the night, and if that is the case, then I feel really, really bad for that kid, because they're probably sitting there with their pants around their ankles, feeling not only the horrible buzz of puberty hormones, but also the worst buyer's remorse of their young life. I feel like the best way to describe this movie is like imagine an episode of Goosebumps where all of the characters are dudes in their 20s with six-pack abs, and then imagine that episode of Goosebumps was stretched out into a feature-length film by being padded out with a bunch of long scenes of men showering from the waist up. And that's basically what this is. And to show you that description is in no way an exaggeration, why don't I give you a better sense of what this movie is all about by breaking down the plot more in-depthly. I'm still not entirely sure if in-depthly is a word, but I keep using it every time I get to this point in my videos, so fingers crossed. Like many great works of art before it, 1313 Giant Killer Bees begins in medias res with the world having already been destroyed by an uprising of gigantic killer bees. A premise that I would have said sounded silly before 2020, but now I'm kind of just hoping I don't will it into existence by making this video. Watching this movie, you can very much feel the screenwriters struggling to reach their page minimum, and that feeling is evident right from the first line.
My name is Bensington. I'm a professor of entomology here at the university. More to the point, I'm a professor of apiology, or the study of honeybees.
Like, he literally says a thing, says he's going to say the thing again, and then he says the thing again, only longer. And I feel very confident in saying that the only reason he didn't just say the thing once is because they wanted to pad out the script as much as they could. Like, I think that they are very aware of the fact that everyone watching this is only doing so in hopes that they'll get a glimpse of some Instahunk's padoodle-doo, and so everything in this movie that isn't shirtless dudes is kind of treated like filler. Which honestly probably explains why this dude talking right now is the only character who we don't see shirtless at some point in the movie. As you've just heard, he goes by the very real name of Bensington, and he's both the main character and somehow completely removed from the main story in every way. He's responsible for creating the titular giant killer bees, but his role in the movie is limited to a few phone calls and these shots we get at the beginning of him talking into a camera while sitting in what I can only imagine is a corner on the other side of the house where the rest of the movie is filmed.
If you're watching this tape, it means you've somehow managed to survive the single worst biological disaster this planet has ever seen. You want to know how it happened, why it happened, who caused it.
Would you though? Like based on the stock audio being piped into the background, the world is in absolute chaos right now, and like maybe I'm just not curious enough, but I feel like if I found myself in a situation where I was surrounded by gigantic bees and every 5 seconds there was either a gunshot or a woman screaming, I kind of feel like the last thing on my mind would be, how did this happen? And like, even if I was a little bit curious, I don't think I would stick around for a front-facing video explaining it, because like, I don't know, I feel like I'd be more focused on like finding food and stuff like that. Although that said, I do genuinely love those stock sounds because they implied that humanity's reaction to giant killer bees was to just constantly shoot at them, which, while believable, also seems like a very dumb way to go about fighting the giant bee uprising. Like, granted, they're big for bees, but they're still not all that big, so I feel like they'd probably be a pretty hard shot. I definitely feel like the giant killer bees would have the upper hand in a gunfight. Also, nothing we see in this movie suggests that the bees can open doors or anything, so I feel like people probably should have just stayed inside a bit and waited for things to chill out. I kind of feel like the fact that everyone's first instinct was to grab a rifle and start firing wildly into the air is probably what contributed to civilization crumbling as quickly as it does here. That might just be me though. I'm a sitter, not a fighter. And like, spoiler alert, but I'm probably not gonna say a lot of nice things about this movie, but I will give it this. This is a decent way to start. It's a lot of action up front, and while I doubt it's really gonna grab anyone's attention, I think it's about as exciting of an opener as a movie like this could hope for. Like, based on that first scene, you might expect this movie to be a schlocky, low-budget thrill ride, but Unfortunately, you could not be more wrong about that, because what happens next was the most boring thing I had ever seen put to film, and until I kept watching this movie and saw some of the even more boring things that happened later on. After Bensington's little talk at the beginning, we flash back to learn that he was in charge of an entomology laboratory that he ran out of the island of San Marino to avoid government overreach, because as an American, he seems to be under the impression that other countries do not have laws. Because Bensington, for some reason, could not be bothered to set foot in said laboratory, he decides to send one of his students, a burly fellow named Redwood, who is curiously the same age as his own teacher, to San Marino in order to monitor their progress. And for whatever reason, the movie believes that we need to see Redwood's entire trip in full. What follows is 4 minutes straight of a man walking, interspersed with what I can only imagine is every single piece of stock footage that comes up when you Google San Marino. Not only is this sequence one of the most boring and pointless moments in the movie, but I gotta imagine it's one of the most expensive as well, because as you'll see, it was actually shot on location for some reason, leading me to believe both that this movie may have been made solely as an excuse to expense a trip, and that there's a chance that the guy playing Redwood was paid in the form of an extremely awkward island vacation with David DeCoteau. And 4 minutes might not sound like that much to you, but believe me when I tell you that it's an eternity when you're actually sitting through it. And to prove this, I feel like I have no choice but to show you the entirety of the film's opening sequence in full. Now, I don't think that I'm allowed to show you a full 4-minute clip of a movie without violating YouTube's copyright policies in some way, so in order to break it up, I will be cutting in an unrelated rant I have about the sitcom Sabrina the Teenage Witch, because, well, I've been wanting to make this rant for a while in a video, and I haven't had a good place to put it until now. Not that this is really a good place to put it. I'm not sure how this will actually play out in practice, so to be safe, I will be providing a timestamp below so you can skip ahead, but that said, I recommend sticking it out if you can, because I truly think that experiencing the long stretches of nothingness in this movie firsthand is necessary to understanding a lot of what I'm going to be talking about going forward. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's begin. Okay, so Sabrina the Teenage Witch is a show about a family of witches, and they have a cat whose name is Salem. That is so fucked up when you think about it. Like, Salem is a place that is best known for being where they murdered witches for being witches. So the idea that a bunch of witches would have a cat named Salem is insane to me. That would be like if I had a dog named like Ground Zero or something.
Redwood. I trusted him implicitly. I had set up a special research facility on the island of San Marino in order to conduct my experiments outside the jurisdiction of the FDA and the US government. The actual work was being done by a group of exchange students, all of whom were gifted enough to handle the work, but once it became obvious things weren't developing as quickly as I'd hoped, it was time to have Redwood take over the project.
And I know what you're all saying right now. The Spellmans didn't actually name their cat. And yes, I know. Salem Saberhagen was a warlord who was turned into a cat by the Witches' Council for trying to take over the world. Fuck you, this isn't my first rodeo. But still, just because the Spellmans didn't name him, that doesn't mean that it's still not really fucked up that that's what his name is. Salem was a witch before he was a cat, so it's still weird that he'd share a name with the greatest tragedy known to witch kind. Like, granted, he's 500 years old, so he was born before the Salem witch trials, but once the trials happened, Salem would absolutely be a touchy subject in the witch community, so it's weird that he'd still continue to willingly go by that exact name. Like, why not shorten it to Sal or something? Like, there are no more Hitlers in the world. Remember when ISIS became a thing and a lot of things called ISIS stopped going by ISIS? This kind of feels like the same thing in my book, and you'd think that any decent warlock would probably be like, maybe I'll go by my middle name now, the second that they dragged Sarah Good up onto those gallows. Of course, Salem probably isn't a decent warlock. Like, he's cute and he's funny, so it kind of distracts from the fact that he was a straight-up warlord. And my guess is that he did a lot of messed up shit, because we've seen a lot of bad things happen on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and the people who do them never get turned into a cat. Like remember her mean cousin who, turned people into dolls and shit? She barely got sent to her room. So this is my theory, okay? Salem isn't actually his real name. It was a name that he chose in order to inflict fear into his enemies. He's saying hey, I'm gonna kill witches like they did in Salem, because honestly, I gotta assume that he killed his fair share of witches in his day in order to be punished in the way that he was. And even if I'm wrong and his name is just a coincidence, that doesn't change the fact that Salem is still a fucked up character, because regardless of his name, he's still a war criminal, but the family just treats him like he's a normal pet in a way that is not okay. Like there are multiple episodes where Sabrina comes home and Salem is just chilling on her bed, which, like, when you stop to think about the circumstances, that is extremely fucked up. Granted, I'm not a father, but I feel like if I were, I would not be cool with Benito Mussolini just chilling in my daughter's bedroom, giving her advice, regardless of how cute and fuzzy he looked. Which, like, while we're on the subject, can we talk about how stupid it is that you would punish someone by turning them into a house cat? Like, we should all be so lucky. All my cat does all day is sleep, eat, and get pet. If I could have that life and all I had to do was commit a war crime, I would be breaking the laws put forth by the Geneva Convention at this very moment. And with that, Redwood arrives at his destination because, lest you forget, we are still talking about this stupid movie. And though we have just seen every last step of his trip to San Marino, the lab he arrives at still looks suspiciously like a mansion in Southern California. Given that this is also the house that was in A Talking Cat, I'm pretty sure this is just where DeCoteau lives, and while I'm not going to knock anyone for making the most of their resources, I still feel like they probably could have done a little bit more to try and make the setting fit the movie. This is supposed to be a guerrilla-style lab operating in secret outside of government jurisdiction. I feel like they probably should have shot around the outdoor pizza oven and fancy pool complete with statue of a little boy peeing. At the very least, I feel like they could have moved the patio furniture out of the shot, because that is not even hard to do. Our protagonist opens the sliding glass doors that you'd see at any scientific research facility, and it is here, nearly 6 minutes into the movie, that we finally get our first piece of dialogue that's not narration. And maybe it's just because this movie had already made my enemies list at this point, but I couldn't help but take what he says here as a meta-commentary on the movie itself, designed solely to mock anyone who is dumb enough to still be watching.
Hey, that's me. It must be Connor. Nice to finally meet you face to face.
How was your trip?
It was very long.
Yeah, movie, it was long. Maybe you shouldn't have shown every last moment of it. The main hunk then talks to this second, newer hunk, and they both do their damnedest to try and convince the audience that they are scientists. And, like, I don't want to imply that I could never believe that there might be two hunks out there who are also scientists, but I certainly don't believe that these two hunks are scientists.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't have time to be tired. Bensington has about a week before we have to show some sort of results to the investors.
A week?
Yeah, that was my reaction too.
I mean, we've been emailing Bensington our data since day one. I mean, surely he must know that we haven't perfected the formula yet.
Relax. We don't have to repopulate the world's entire honeybee population. We just have to show some progress.
Still, for as unconvincing as their science talk may have been, it does at least give us a better idea of what the fuck is going on in this movie right now. Apparently, Bensington and his team of burly researchers have been tasked with repopulating the Earth's bee population, and the main guy has come down to speed up the process because they have a meeting with investors in a week. That deadline is ultimately the driving force behind most of the plot of this movie, but that said, I do think it's very funny that the reason behind the deadline is investors, because one, what in God's name are they investing in? Like as best I can tell, it's just the general concept of bees, which, not gonna lie, doesn't sound very profitable. And two, there's a lot of unrealistic stuff in this movie, but the idea that any corporation has any sense of urgency about anything related to environmentalism is by far the least believable. Also, as I'm sure everybody watching this already knows, repopulating the bees is actually a problem we need to figure out, so I think it's very funny that this movie seems to be trying to tackle some real-world issues. Like, for as much as I appreciate the sentiment and hope we can spread awareness on the issue, I do love that whoever was making this seemingly had the thought of, like, you know what our viewers are gonna want while they struggle to masturbate? A message about climate change. After struggling to make it through a conversation about science without pooping his pants, Science Hunk number 2 takes the main guy on a tour of the mansion lab to meet the rest of the team, and this gives us, the audience, some time to realize that Redwood sucks because despite the fact that he's the protagonist, he's also the villain. This movie really takes some bold artistic risks. The first people we meet are named Randy and Steve, and Hunk number 2 sums up their entire character with the following sentence.
That's Randy and Steve. You wouldn't know what to look at them, but they're two of our best entomologists. Unfortunately, they're obsessed with soccer.
You now know literally everything about them that there is to know. Randy and Steve spend most of the movie kicking a ball back and forth, and despite the fact that he has only just met them, Redwood finds this unacceptable.
Hey, Randy, Steve.
We'll be there in a minute. Yeah, as soon as I beat him.
See what I mean?
I think I'm beginning to see why you're behind on your research.
Oh, they're great scientists.
Then they should be in lab.
Just got off a 14-hour shift. You want to see the others?
Well, that depends.
On
Whether or not we'll be interrupting their ping pong tournament.
I'll be honest, I don't really understand what bee researchers do that would require them to work a 14-hour shift, but whatever it is, I'm sure it's enough to earn them 30 seconds worth of soccer. Unfortunately, Redwood does not see it this way because he is a real hard ass. I can't imagine he's going to be very popular in the lab. I feel like they probably won't be inviting him to any lab pool parties anytime soon. The two then walk away, wait for a bit, then walk back to the exact same part of the yard where they just were, only now Randy and Steve have magically been replaced by a sexy beekeeper mummy named Paul. Unfortunately, it takes us a moment to actually get to meet Paul because the movie makes the main character stand absurdly far away from him.
Yeah, I wouldn't go any further without protective clothing.
They say it's for safety reasons, but my hunch is that the reason Paul is standing so far away is that it gives the movie the opportunity to show a long shot of Paul walking towards us, because this movie is really nothing but filler. It's weird that they would take such strong precautions here because it's very clear from the rest of this movie that security protocol in this lab is laxed at best.
I think you're both safe. I just use smoke on the hive.
You think you should be safe? You are literally a beekeeper. What other job do you have besides keeping bees at bay? Like, honestly, it's no wonder that the bees take over when the first line of defense against them was that bad at his job. You have blood on your hands, Paul. Also, I have never personally kept bees, so I am the first to admit that I'm no expert here, but that said, I have worked in enough offices to know a bunch of cardboard boxes stacked on top of each other when I see them. The next character we meet is the janitor, Charlie, and his entire personality is that he's mad at how poorly he's treated by the rest of the people in the lab. I'm not entirely sure why they included this detail exactly, because it never really comes back into play ever, but that doesn't stop the movie from laying it on pretty thick.
This is Charlie. He's our maintenance man slash caretaker slash
babysitter. All of you are such geniuses. How come I'm the only one around here who can empty a garbage can? guys can't do anything without my help.
Dude, you deserve all the credit.
I don't need to be patronized.
And like, based on that interaction, it actually seems to me as though Charlie is actually the mean one in this situation. Like, I'm not going to fault a janitor for demanding respect that they deserve, but I also think that Charlie might just have rage issues.
You're the new guy, huh?
I guess I am. My name's...
Unimportant to me. I'm the janitor. I guess if you need a light bulb changed, you could just yell, "Hey you," at me or something. That's what everyone else around here does.
That said, though, the people in the lab may just be creating some hostile working conditions for Charlie in ways that we never see. Like based on what we do see, it does seem as though he's been made to clean the facilities without his shirt on. So that may very well point to some larger HR issues going on in this lab. And if that's the case, then Charlie's attitude is totally justified. Up next, we meet Anna, who plays the extremely important role of the girl.
I heard our new boss just arrived. I'm Anna.
You can call me Redwood, and I'm not the boss. I'm just here to get things back up to speed.
I was about to take Redwood to the lab.
Lewis is in there. I'm sure he and our charming guest will have much to talk about.
Lewis is our top biochemist, head of the research team. He's one that you won't have to worry about taking this seriously. I mean, he spends every waking minute in there studying Bensington's formula.
He might as well move in there as far as I'm concerned. We'll talk more later, after you get settled in.
I look forward to it.
As you can clearly tell, the main asshole likes Anna, which is by far the most baffling creative choice in a movie that is nothing but baffling creative choices. Like, I feel like this movie is very clearly meant to be a piece of homoerotica, so for it to go out of its way to make sure we know that the lead character is straight seems like an added wrinkle that it didn't need to give itself. Is homoerotica a word? Like it's homoerotic and it's erotica, so I figured that I could combine them, but did I just invent a new word actually? If so, trademark. Granted, none of the guys here really have sex with one another, but up until that point it kind of felt like the implication was that they could. Going out of your way to establish Redwood as straight feels like this softcore gay porn's way of saying no homo, and I'm not entirely sure why it felt the need to do that. It almost feels like the people making this movie felt like having too many hunky gay men in one place was way too over the top to be believable, so introducing a female love interest was their way of grounding the movie in reality. Like the way it's set up, it almost reads to me like the movie is saying, like, yes, we're telling a story where humanity is destroyed by a bunch of giant killer zombie bees, but having 8 gay men in STEM, yeah, nobody's gonna buy that. Despite being the main dude's love interest, Anna is actually dating the last member of the cast, a scientist named Lewis. Although I'll be honest, I didn't realize that they were dating until rewatching the movie to write this script, because it really does not come up again, ever. And I don't know why they include it.
Oh, Anna, huh?
That's Lewis's girlfriend.
Great. Just what we need around here. Some more drama.
Yes, it does. That's what people watch movies for. Like I genuinely think this movie knows how boring it is, and instead of trying to fix that, it's decided to just rub it in our faces. Lewis is the main scientist in the lab, and he's also the only person that Redwood seems to respect for some reason.
So, this is where the magic happens.
Oh, not as much as I'd like, but...
Well, it's a lot of responsibility for one person.
Oh, you haven't met the others?
Oh, I have. That's why I say one person.
Still? It's been what feels like 4 days. Why are you still upset about this? Like I genuinely am not sure why he is so bitter about seeing 2 guys playing soccer, but he genuinely seems like an asshole to me. And unfortunately, his assholishness gets a lot worse before it gets better. Lewis goes over his research with Redwood, and Redwood is not happy about it because he needs results, damn it.
There are 4 fresh test subjects, female workers. Paul gathered them from the hive this morning. I'll be giving them doses of HKP4, tagging them, then releasing them back into the general population. Now, if everything works, they'll be able to release the chemicals to the rest of the hive through their pheromones.
Why not the queen?
The queen uses pheromones to suppress hive activity or to entice mating. The female workers can spread the dose equally to the rest of the hive, so the entire hive gets the same dose.
And do you think this variation of HKP4 will actually work?
Well, I've only seen the computer mock-ups, but on paper it works.
I need results by next week, Lewis. I don't need a hive of super bees. I just need some positive results. You know, like hive growth or resistance to temperature change. Just something.
And like, there are many, many things that I want to discuss about that clip, but I got to assume that the thing you guys would want me to discuss first is the special effects, because as you can clearly see, they are not very good. That said though, I would honestly argue that they're not as bad as I was expecting them to be. Like, maybe it's just that making this show has made me realize how difficult stuff like that can actually be, but I feel like they probably could have been a lot worse. Granted, I'm not sure why they didn't just use a shot of actual bees, because I feel like that wouldn't be that hard to pull off. But if we're being honest, the problems I have with that shot have less to do with the fact that the special effects look crummy and more to do with the fact that they said that there were 4 bees despite there clearly only being 2, and the fact that those 2 bees seem to be being kept in what appears to be an ashtray.
Those are 4 fresh test subjects, female workers. Paul gathered them from the hive this morning.
Still, the special effects in that clip I just showed you aren't nearly as bad as the dialogue, which, like a lot of the dialogue in this movie, is just a bunch of pseudo-scientific mumbo-jumbo that doesn't really mean anything and was clearly only included in order to pad out the runtime of the film so that it was longer than 18 minutes. This movie seems to be jumping through hoops to try and get us to buy that the people we're watching are actual bee scientists, and like, I don't. And honestly, I don't think that any amount of scientific talk is going to change that when their laboratory is clearly just somebody's kitchen. Granted, they do dress the set up a little bit by including the diagram of human anatomy that I assume you keep in every bee research laboratory, but that said, the red leather chair that they kept in the background of the shot still feels like a dead giveaway that this isn't a real scientific facility. Also later, they show slightly this way and you can see the refrigerator. I think the screenwriter's plan here was to just put as many scientific sounding words in a sentence as possible, because that would make it harder to understand and thus feel more official, but I don't think it really panned out for them like they were hoping. Like, don't get me wrong, I definitely don't understand most of what's being said here, but there's never a point where I don't just assume that it's gibberish, especially since, like, when I do actually manage to make sense of their science talk, it very rarely feels like the person writing it had any clue what they were trying to say. Like, at one point, Paul refers to male drones.
All the male drones are dead.
And I don't know that much about bees, but the limited knowledge I do have is enough to know that drone means male bee, so saying male drone is redundant, and you'd think that a professional beekeeper would probably know that. And if you've ever seen me struggle to string a sentence together, you know that I'm not really a stickler for grammar, so normally I wouldn't even bother to point this out, but like, what I'm mad about here isn't so much his poor word choice as the fact that it feels like that poor word choice was an intentional decision meant to make the script longer. And there are so many instances of that in this movie that it honestly adds up after a while and starts to feel like you're just being drained of precious moments of your life that you're just never going to get back. Redwood is upset to learn that the kitchen lab probably isn't going to be able to fix the world's dwindling bee population in the span of a week, so he secretly gets on the phone with Bensington, disguising his true nature of his plan with the subtlety and finesse of a master spy.
Hey Mom, it's me. I just want to let you know I arrived in San Marino okay.
I assume someone's listening in on this call.
Yeah, sorry about the static. You can never tell with this international phone service though.
Okay.
Smooth. I'm not a particularly good liar either, but I feel like if he really wanted nobody listening in on his conversation, he probably should have started by just not screaming every word of it. Like, not gonna lie, but I feel like after hearing this phone call, Bensington is regretting his choice of moles.
They have nothing we can show the investors?
No.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to go with plan B. You have the new additive I gave you, right?
Yeah, I never go anywhere without my insulin kit.
Good boy. I want you to inject 20 units of the additive into the test subject's food supply. And for God's sake, be discreet about it.
You don't want me sharing those cookies you made with everybody else?
Of all the weird pieces of dialogue in this movie, I honestly think that this one might be the weirdest because, like obviously, he's literally having a coded conversation right now. The idea that he would feel the need to stop and ask, like, so wait, you're telling me I shouldn't tell people about our super secret plan? Also, not for nothing, but if I heard someone say that on the phone, you had better believe I would have quite a few follow-up questions, you know? 1, why is your mom such an asshole that she doesn't want you sharing these cookies? 2, why are you as an adult man listening to her when she says not to share your cookies? And 3, where the hell are these cookies of which you speak? Because you just took an international trip with only a backpack, so I feel like you probably don't actually have any. Bensington tells Redwood to take some secret additive to the lab, and just when you thought this dude couldn't get any more obvious about his secret evil plan, he just straight up brandishes the syringe that the additive is in right in front of the dude he's trying to hide it from. Thankfully, Lewis doesn't catch on.
Yeah. Oh, you're a diabetic.
Yeah, my mom was insistent that I take my insulin.
And like, I know I've given this movie a lot of shit for how little it seems to know about science, but if you want a good idea of just how bad things can get in that regard, then know that the people making it seem to believe that insulin is something that an adult man who, lest you forget, is a scientist, might decide not to take without their mother insisting on it. Granted, I don't take insulin, so maybe I'm wrong, but I'm fairly certain it's not like a multivitamin. Lewis leaves and Redwood sneaks the additive into the bee's ashtray. Then when Lewis comes back, Redwood covers his tracks like the cool cat that he is.
I gotta get a fresh batch of HKP4 from the refrigerator down in the rec room. Do you mind watching over the test subjects until I get back?
Sure.
That syringe didn't even have a needle on it. Come on, movie. Get it together. Unfortunately, the additive ends up killing the bees, and this leads to one of my favorite moments in the movie, because while I know I've complained about this movie's incessant need to over-explain everything, it takes this impulse to do so far that it ends up having Lewis explain bee death in a way that's so unnecessary that it kind of swings back around to being fun again.
Are they feeding?
They appear to be. No.
What happened?
Formula killed them.
What?
They're dead. I didn't give them a lethal dose. I don't understand.
Are you sure they're dead?
They're bees. They don't remain motionless like this for this long unless it's extremely cold or they're dead.
As I've said repeatedly, I am no expert, but I still feel pretty confident in my ability to recognize a dead bee when I see one. And the fact that the movie feels the need to explain it beyond saying like, look at it, that's clearly a dead bee, is genuinely fascinating to me. The bee's death leads to a fight among Redwood and Lewis, and then, twist, we find out that the bees have come back to life as zombies, and also they're giant now. You might think it's weird that I've been talking about this movie this long and we're only now getting to the giant bees, but in its defense, everything that I've talked about this far has been from the first 20 minutes or so. But since that's where the majority of the plot happens, I felt like I should probably spend a little more time on it. Like, time-wise, there's still a lot of the movie left, but this plot summary is probably going to get a lot quicker from here because everything that happens going forward is just long scenes of dudes doing mildly sexual things, then getting picked off one by bees and such. The first people to die are the soccer players who decide to call it for the day and head to their rooms. We then follow this one dude as he walks up the stairs, strips down to his underpants, and then just starts like rubbing his chest for an inordinately long period of time. And yeah, if you're here for the sexy stuff, this is about as explicit as it gets. He just kind of does that for a while, you know, his hands never go below his chest, and we see a bunch of wide shots, so it's never even implied that something more might be happening, and he honestly doesn't even seem to change things up all that much, so like even if it was somehow what you were super into, I can't imagine you wouldn't eventually get bored after a while. I mean, sure, the movie does try to break it up a little bit by implying that the bees are super into it and giving us a bunch of shots of the chest rubbing from their perspective. But still, I would say that it goes on for too long. Like, remember back to the opening sequence I showed you, and that was 4 minutes long. The chest rubbing goes on for 9 minutes, and believe me when I tell you, it feels like so much longer. Mercifully, that scene ends when that young lad gets stung to death by a giant zombie bee. And that in turn makes him into a zombie, which seamlessly transitions us into the next scene. The other guy who is playing soccer, whose name I absolutely refuse to look up, is now taking a shower, and so we get yet another long, boring scene of a shirtless dude rubbing himself for an unnecessarily long time, although, that said, of the sexy scenes, this one is by far the most interesting because it is mercifully short at only 5 minutes long, and at least stuff actually happens during it. While soccer hunk number 2 is showering, the now zombified chest rubber makes his way across the hall in his underwear before menacingly standing behind his friend while he showers. And for whatever reason, his friend is just like totally cool with it.
I guess you've decided to stop talking. It's a wise decision, my friend. Well, while you're back there, would you mind scrubbing my back?
Like I said, this movie feels like it's going out of its way to try and make sure we know that none of these characters are gay, and while that's a weird choice given what kind of movie it is, it does make this scene feel like almost kind of wholesome. Like, the characters in this porno are so weirdly asexual that it honestly feels like they might just be good buds who shower together without any hanky-panky attached. Granted, it is weird that this one dude can't seem to tell the difference between having his back loofah'd and having a zombie creepily rub its finger down his spine, but based on what we see, I'm genuinely pretty happy for them because it seems like they have a really nice thing going on. Of course, then the zombie friend bites the other one in the neck and things stop being that nice. From there we head out to the backyard where the beekeeper is being chased by one of the giant bees, a fact that the movie illustrates by giving us yet another instance of bee vision. And watching that, it kind of started to feel like it was doing that horror movie thing where it hides the monster from the audience in order to make it scarier. And if that is the case, then it's a very weird choice because 1, we have already seen the monster, and 2, even if we hadn't, we still know what bees look like. So even in a movie where the special effects are better, I can't imagine anyone being shown a giant one and being shocked by the reveal. Of course, it's also possible that they don't show the bees because they don't feel like doing the special effects, which honestly would explain why when we do get a third-person point of view of the beekeeper running for his life, he's very clearly running from nothing. The beekeeper is eventually cornered by the 2 soccer players who are now dressed in matching underpants. And given that the one dude was infected while showering, it implies that there was a scene we didn't get to see where his zombie is just like, "Me no want anyone to see my dick. Me better throw on some boxers before I kill my coworker." My zombie voice isn't very good. Which, like, speaking of, while we're on the topic of the underwear, I do want to take a moment to say that the only thing that really creeped me out about this movie is that everyone in the cast is wearing the exact same kind, implying that they were like a filmmaking choice of some kind. And while I'm sure that's not that weird for this sort of thing, there is something that's just kind of like off to me about telling people what kind of underpants they have to wear. Particularly when the kind that they have to wear looks like it might be a religious undergarment of some sort. While all this is going on, Redwood and Lewis are trying to get to the bottom of what happened to the bees when they drank Benzington's secret additive. And it's honestly weird that they never just stick their head out of a window and see that the bees are just chasing their coworkers. Like, yes, the house is big, but it's not like can't hear a zombie apocalypse going on around you big, if that makes sense. My favorite moment of them trying to get to the bottom of things has to be when Redwood shows Lewis one of the giant bees' corpse and asks for an explanation, and this is what Lewis says.
Is that one of the test subjects? Yeah, it still has traces of the paint marker you put on it.
How could this happen?
I was hoping you could tell me.
If I had to guess, I would say the test subject's grown into an enormous size, broke out of the glass canister, and crawled out of an open window.
Like, I kind of feel like the big mystery there was more in the how the bees grew to be giant. Once you gloss over that part, everything else you're doing is just like stating the obvious. When Redwood is done being terrible at science with Lewis, he of course decides that it's his turn to go take a shower, and so we're treated to another long boring scene, only because it's the star of the movie this time. It lasts for 10 goddamn minutes straight. And like, I will be honest, at this point in the movie, I simply couldn't do it anymore, so like, this is what I saw. And really the entire rest of the movie kind of felt like that to me. Like, there's a lot of fun stuff that happens, but mostly it's just a lot of boring nothing. So it honestly doesn't even feel worth it trying to summarize the rest, because stuff basically plays out exactly like you'd expect. Shirtless dudes chase a bunch of other dudes around. Redwood has a weird dream about having a three-way with Lewis that's never fully explained.
You guys got room for one more?
And the bees ultimately take over the world. End of movie. It is the worst goddamn thing I've ever seen. No. No, 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 nope, 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 nope. Well, kinda. When this movie is fun, it's very fun. Like this scene of Redwood fighting a giant bee is literally everything that I dream of when I set out to find a bad movie to talk about. Unfortunately, those scenes are few and far between, and the scenes it takes to get to them are some of the most boring shit I have ever seen in my life. And like, I watched most of Lost, so it's saying something. I never thought I'd say this sentence, but if you can find a group of friends willing to watch it with you, you're probably going to enjoy this porno a lot more. Like, at least then you'd have someone to talk to during the long stretches when literally nothing happens. Overall, I think the boring stuff outweighs the good stuff, and this movie is not really all that enjoyable in the long run. The long stretches of absolutely nothing happening in this movie gave me a lot of time to think, and in that time, really the only thing I could think about is like, seriously, who the fuck is this movie for? The obvious answer is that it's for no one, because I truly cannot imagine anyone, including the people making it, genuinely believes that there's any entertainment value to 1313 Giant Killer Bees. Like, it has its moments, sure, but it was made in 2010 when streaming was readily available, and I truly cannot fathom how this movie could possibly survive in a market where it's bound to be listed right alongside thousands of other movies that are just as easily accessible. Actually, no, I take that back. Most of those movies are more accessible than this one because those movies are free, and lest you forget, I paid $4.99 to watch this. God, the more I think about that, the worse it makes me feel. But for as much as I want to say that this movie is just some weird passion project that nobody but me has ever seen, unfortunately I don't think that's the case. Like, as baffling as it is to say, I genuinely do think that there is actually a market for this movie because, like, well, there has to be, right? A quick glance at his IMDb page makes it very clear that 1313 Giant Killer Bees falls neatly into David DeCoteau's business plan, and if I'm right in saying that the house in this movie is his, then that business plan must be working out pretty damn well for him. Like I said, he's made nearly 200 movies. Like, 1313 seems to be a series of sorts, and there are more films in that series than most directors will make in their entire lifetime, so clearly something is working here. You don't keep doing the same thing over and over again unless on some level it's worth doing over and over again. And the only thing that would make a movie like this worth doing over and over again is money. So clearly there are people out there who are watching this stuff. And as much as I'd love to keep playing dumb and acting like I have no clue how this is possible, the truth is I know exactly where the movie's audience is coming from, and it's this right here. Right in that poster, you have a little bit of nudity and the possibility of more nudity to come, and that alone is enough to convince people to do just about anything. I already talked about it in this video right here, which you should go watch because it's my least watched video I made last year, but I used to work for a website writing articles, and one of the best ways to get people to click on those articles was to put some amount of sex in the thumbnail. Like literally any amount of sex would work. It didn't even matter if it made sense. I'm not even joking when I say that one of the most viewed articles I ever wrote was called 6 Pairs of Tits You Need to See Today, and while I would love to believe that people were clicking into it for the meta commentary on internet culture I wrote, I know in my heart that the real reason they did so was boobies. Sex drives our decisions. Like I said, this movie probably only exists because that small amount of sex in the poster is enough to entice people to watch an entire boring-ass movie. And while that sounds silly, and I'm sure a lot of us want to feel above that, I don't know that all of us can, because I'm sure a lot of us have made similar dumb decisions for reasons that weren't all that different in the grand scheme of things. Like, not for nothing, but I feel very confident in saying that at least a few of you clicked on this because you saw that same poster with that same small amount of sex in my thumbnail, and that alone was enough to make you want to click on this very, very long video. Sex can also terrify us, you know? Like I said, this video will definitely be demonetized, even though I don't actually think there's anything particularly dirty about it. Like, just the mere mention of sex is enough to make the algorithm clutch her pearls and drop her monocle into the glass of champagne she's drinking. For those wondering, yes, the algorithm is a girl. And it's not just the algorithm that's scandalized by sex. Like, the entire time I spent watching this, all I kept thinking was, like, why not just show a dick at this point? Like, the movie spent so much time teasing people with the possibility that it might, and it's pretty obvious that that's what anyone who unironically presses play on this movie is there to see, so, like, why not just do it? And, like, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons why, but I gotta imagine that one of them is that it's probably a lot harder to find actors who are willing to do nudity. Like, my guess is that the people in this movie aren't doing it as a passion project, so they're probably not willing to go into this thing whole hog. Literally. If I were to try and get into the heads of these actors, my guess is that they're probably like, fine, I'll do this, I need the money, but I'm not going to risk my future by showing more than I want to. And while I think that obviously nobody should show more than they're comfortable with, it's kind of weird that if they got a little more naked, things would seem infinitely worse to a lot of people. Like, I personally don't think that the actors should be judged for any amount of nudity that they want to show, but there's a good chance that some people they meet in their future feel differently, so bearing it all for a shitty low-budget movie is more risk than it's worth. Like, there's a very good possibility that somewhere down the line, some potential employer or something might see them naked on film and be like, welp, I guess you don't get a job now, despite the fact that odds are pretty good that said employer has, at one point in their life, enjoyed looking at naked people on film. Hell, sex is even responsible for forging our identities in a lot of ways. Like, if you ever want to think about just what a powerful force sex plays in all of our lives, then think about the fact that the word asexual is a thing. Like, even the people for whom sex is not an important part of their life have a word that defines their identity in the way that it relates back to sex. That is honestly so insane when you stop to think about it. And after thinking about it for long enough, you kind of start to wonder where all of that power comes from. And while I'm sure it's from a number of different places, I truly believe that one of the biggest reasons why it's so powerful is the fact that there's something kind of mysterious about it. Sex is an inherently private thing, and that, coupled with the aforementioned fear of it that our culture seems to have, means that a lot of the sexual aspects of our lives are kept under wraps. Like I can talk to someone every single day of my life, but odds are I'm never going to know much about the sexual aspects of their life beyond what they tell me, and odds are that's not going to be very much because, truth told, I don't want to hear that shit. Still, for as hidden as it is, it's also everywhere. It's in movies and ads and poetry and music and the Muppets and just about every other aspect of our lives. It's rarely acknowledged, but it's always there. And it's this weird combination of secrecy and ubiquity that gives sex a kind of mystique that not a lot of other things in our lives have. In a weird way, it's kind of like the monster in the horror movie of our lives, you know? This big presence that looms over everything, but still lurks in the shadows, and the fact that we only get glimpses of it here and there allows our minds to fill in the blanks and turn it into something a lot bigger than it actually is. And honestly, just like the monster in a horror movie, a lot of the times when you actually do get a good glimpse at the damn thing, it gets a lot less interesting. For as weird as it is that they don't show nudity in this movie, truth be told, the movie is probably a lot more intriguing without it in a lot of ways. I don't know how that's possible because this is truly the most boring movie I've ever seen, but I do think that it's true somehow. Like, at least with the way it's shot currently, there's still the possibility that something more exciting might happen. If there was a version of this movie that was exactly the same in every way, only the models weren't wearing those weird Book of Mormon underpants they have on, I can't imagine anyone reacting to it in any way besides like, yep, There's a penis. I probably don't need to keep watching this for 10 minutes straight, though. I feel like I kind of get the gist. The more I think about it, the more I feel like there's probably a reason why a large portion of how sex is discussed is done through innuendo and metaphor and all that jazz. And that's because when you actually stop to think about the reality of what it is, it starts to feel a little less special. Like, I don't know if this makes sense exactly, but I feel like if Lord Byron was out there writing poems called, like, A Graphic Description of Vaginal Penetration, I don't really think that they'd catch on as much. Probably wouldn't get read at as many weddings. Because honestly, when you stop to think about it, it is very funny that one of the most beautiful, wonderful, important parts of the human experience entails finding another person and rubbing two of the silliest body parts you got together until you both start making funny faces. But because it is, for many of us, one of the most beautiful, wonderful, important parts of the human experience, I get why we do whatever we can to preserve the mystique around it. If you lessen how beautiful and wonderful and important sex is, that makes the human experience feel that much less beautiful, wonderful, and important. And I can feel myself getting into bummer territory here, so I just want to go on record and say that I'm not trying to be nihilistic here, because I genuinely believe that as great as you think sex is, that's as great as it is, and nothing should diminish that for you. But truth told, I also believe that we as a society have banded together to turn sex into something a lot bigger than it actually is, and the mere fact that this movie I talked about even exists is proof of that. Like I said, this movie entirely hinges on the idea that people can look at this poster and feel like, wow, I would like to see what happens below where that picture cuts off. And I really think the possibility of nudity is only exciting to us because it's something you don't necessarily get to see every day. I mean, I do, obviously, because anyone who knows me knows that I'm a good old-fashioned poon hound, but a less sexually experienced person than I might not be so lucky. Like, not for nothing, but I do believe that if this exact movie had been made with women and not men, then I don't think it would have felt like such a massive ripoff for the mere fact that we as a society have decided that lady boobs are sinful and must be hidden from the eyes of the Lord. So as a result, seeing a woman rub her bare chest for 10 minutes straight might feel a little bit more dirty and thus a lot more worthy of any potential viewer's time. Don't get me wrong, I still think it would probably be extremely boring, but I don't think you get the feeling like you were being actively robbed while you watch it like you do with this movie. And believe me when I say that this is not me arguing for a more sexually liberated society where everyone walks around naked long enough that genitals become banal, because if anything, I would like to be wearing more clothes right now. That said, though, I do think it's proof that the way that we treat sex can change how it's perceived, and I genuinely think that maybe we need to change how we do that, because I think that maybe we've taken the mystique we've built around it a little bit too far at this point. Like, if I learned anything from watching 1313 Giant Killer Bees, it's that sex can be boring as hell. For better or worse, we treat it like it's the most interesting thing that can possibly exist. But believe me when I tell you that after watching 80 minutes of this movie, I can say without hesitation that that is not always the case. Don't get me wrong, it can be interesting, but I don't think that it's inherently interesting just because it's sex. Like, if it really is like the monster in the horror movie of our lives, then I think it's safe to say that sometimes you get a glimpse of it and it's everything your brain had conjured up and then some. But other times, all you get is a lot of build-up and anticipation, only to be greeted with this. If my video does get demonetized, it'll ultimately come down to YouTube's attempt to protect the children in some way, and that's honestly kind of a shame because of all the videos I've made, this one is probably the one that a younger audience might be able to get the most out of. Like, not too young, obviously, but I feel like if you're already at an age where you felt compelled to click a video called The Most Boring Porno Ever Made, you're probably ready to hear anything that I'm about to say. I talked at the beginning of this video about how I think the target audience for this movie is probably someone on the younger side who's still navigating all this shit and doesn't know enough to know that this movie probably isn't worth it. And the more I think about that kid, the more I feel badly for them. And like, not just because they were tricked into spending $5 on this movie. Right now, they probably have a lot of genuinely scary thoughts swirling around in their heads about sex that they're trying to figure out, you know? They're probably worried that they don't know enough, or that their bodies are weird, or that they'll do it wrong and everyone will laugh at them, or maybe they're worried that they'll never do it at all. Maybe they're not sure what they're into yet, or they do know what they're into, but they're afraid to admit that they're into it, or maybe they're not into anything at all and they feel weird because of that. Maybe they're stressed that they're a virgin and they're super ashamed of it, or maybe they've already had sex and they're worried that they'll be judged because of it and are super ashamed of that because there's not an aspect of sex that we can eventually bring back to shame in some way. Whatever the case may be, they're probably really freaked out that everything they've learned up until this point says that this thing is the most beautiful, wonderful, important part of the human experience, and they don't have all the answers for it. And because of that, they think they'll fuck it up in some way, and as a result, their experience as a human will end up being that much less beautiful and wonderful and important. And if any of those teens manage to make it past the algorithm and get to this part of the video, then just know this. It's fine. Sex is fine, you're fine, your body is fine, what you're into is fine, provided it's consensual. If you do it a lot, it's fine. If you never do it at all, it's fine. It's all fine. At the end of the day, it's a couple of people who are rubbing two of the silliest body parts they got together until they make funny faces. And odds are it's not worth the amount of stress you're putting on it. And truth told, I don't think that it's just teens who could stand to hear that, because though it definitely gets better the older you get, I don't think that any of us truly ever really solve the mystery of sex. After a certain age, it's kind of just expected that we're all on the same page with this thing, but like, are we? Maybe. I don't know, and I'm not about to ask, because I don't want people thinking that I'm a 47-year-old who still has questions about sex. There's so many unknowns surrounding it, and that can be really scary no matter what age you are. Like, not for nothing, but I don't think that it's an accident that most of the places we go to try and hook up are the same places that serve alcohol, because like, it's not like we're trying to be more in our heads in those situations. Maybe the answers aren't as obvious as they were when we were a teen, but there's still a lot of questions there, you know? Will they like me? Will they judge me? Am I doing this right? Will they stay? Will they stay longer than I want? Is this all just an elaborate plan to murder me and make a lampshade out of my skin? By its very nature, sex is always going to have a little bit of a question mark around it. And I think that anytime anything isn't 100% certain, it's really easy for us to start trying to fill in the blanks on our own. Like, just knowing that there's more there makes us want to know what that more is. So in our attempts to try and figure it out, we keep thinking and thinking, trying our best to be certain about all those uncertainties. And when we do that, we usually end up building things up so big that in the end, the reality of that more usually ends up being a lot less than it was in our own brains. If this movie's existence is any indication, a lot of us are hardwired to expect that there's bound to be more than just what we see. And like, it's not just with sex stuff. There's so much in our lives hiding just below the belt, and our need to try and get a glimpse at what that might be can really screw with our heads sometimes. I talked at the beginning of this video about how those voices in my head can make it really difficult for me to make stuff sometimes, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that those voices in my head aren't really voices in my head at all, so much as voices that I think might be in other people's heads. I know that just by existing in the world, that means that other people have thoughts about me, and even though odds are that most of those thoughts are just like hey, look at that guy who I'm ambivalent towards. The fact that I don't know that for sure makes me want to try and think of every other possibility of what those thoughts might be. So my mind races. I think and I think and I think and I think, and I end up thinking of all sorts of reasons why people might not like the things that I make, or why they might not like me, or how what I'm saying is stupid or not funny. And by the end of it, I've spent so much time trying to figure out what other people are thinking that I end up just thinking it myself. And like I said, the best way I've gotten past this has been the fact that I've been extremely lucky to get some indication that maybe not everyone out there is thinking the worst things about me that I could think of. And while I'm very grateful for that, the truth is that there's no amount of comments or likes or views that's going to make me stop thinking that everyone out there is seeing some secret world that I can't see, and doing my best to try and figure out every possibility of what that might be. Hell, even with the nice comments, my brain still finds a way to read between the lines. Like, I'm not even joking when I say that there have been many times in my life where I have, lost respect for people for the sole reason that they dared to give me a compliment. Like, my brain goes into overdrive trying to figure out how there might be more to the nice thing that I'm seeing, and when I can't find anything on the surface, I start to think oh, then there must be something wrong with the person saying it. I said before on here that I don't love compliments, and one of the reasons why is that they can sometimes make me feel like a real asshole. And for what it's worth, it's not just the negative thoughts that get to me. Sometimes I'll be feeling really good about myself and this series, and I'll think okay, maybe I'm not a total fraud, and whatever mild successes I got weren't a fluke, and rather than being hooray, instead I start to think okay, well, if my successes aren't a fluke, then why don't I have more of them? And then I start looking at other people's successes, like the poster for a cheesy low-budget porno, and my mind starts to conjure up all sorts of ideas about what amazing dicks of happiness might be hiding just outside of frame. And even though I know that odds are the things I'm imagining aren't actually there, there's still something inside me that compels me to spend my $4.99 trying to get a glimpse at them anyway. That wasn't my most eloquent metaphor to date, but I feel like my point still stands. I think that as long as the possibility for more exists, I'm always going to wonder what that more is. And that honestly sucks, because no matter how vigorously I rack my brain trying to figure out all the things I'm not seeing, there's no amount of certainty that's ever going to make all the uncertainty go away. In all honesty, I think I should be trying to go in the opposite direction with all this stuff, rather than letting my mind race with all the possibilities of what more there might be that I'm not seeing. I need to learn how to focus on the stuff that's right in front of my eyes, because at the end of the day, the only way I'm ever going to get over any of this stuff is learn to say, maybe there is some secret world that I'm not seeing, but if there is, it's fine. I've maybe downplayed the importance of sex a little bit more than I should have at times in this video, so it feels only right that I talk about, why it's so beloved. That's a weird way to describe sex, but I can't think of a better word right now, so I'm going to go with it. And again, people like sex for a variety of reasons, the feeling, the connection, the fact that a lot of us are born with the innate desire to reproduce, because at the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of chemicals. But one of the biggest reasons that I think goes unspoken a lot of the time is that sex lets you turn your brain off a little bit. Once you get past all the uncertainty that surrounds it, you get to a point where your instincts take over for a little bit, and you stop being this giant mess of thoughts and get to live as a feeling for just a little. And that's pretty cool, because thoughts suck ass. There's an urban legend that says that, scientifically speaking, bees shouldn't be able to fly, but the only reason that they can is because nobody ever told the bees that, so they just do it anyway. And while that's obviously not actually true, I can really identify with that idea a lot, and I feel like I'm probably not the only one. I think at the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of giant bees being weighed down by our own thoughts. And It's honestly not until we're able to learn how to push forward and do it anyway that any of us are ever going to learn how to fly. Not going to lie, hearing myself say that out loud, that feels like kind of a corny way to end this video, but I'm going to take my own advice and not think about it too much. But yeah, that's my video. Please like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. You know the drill. You've seen a YouTube video before, I imagine. Also, if you are new and are looking for more videos by me, I recommend this one as a jumping off point. It starts as a true story about the time that I accidentally changed the official Harry Potter canon, which did actually happen, and then it eventually just becomes a rant about how bad J.K. Rowling sucks now, and for better or worse, I think it's the best thing I've ever made on here, so check it out if you want. Other than that, end of video. Well, kind of. I'm going to announce a Patreon after this because this video is definitely going to get demonetized and I want to try and make some money off of it, but you don't have to watch that unless you're thinking about donating to my Patreon. But that's going to start now, so... Hey guys, Willie here, and welcome to my Patreon announcement, because... yeah, that's where my life is now. Truth told, I've been wanting to start a Patreon for a while now, but I've also had a lot of reservations about it too, but that said, the more I build my channel up, the more I realize that my business model is kind of reliant on eventually having one of these, so like I kind of gotta do it if I'm going to continue to try and build this channel. That said, in order to make myself feel a little bit less hinky, I feel like I should just say a few things up front before I go into what this Patreon will be offering. So like, I guess these are my caveats before you go giving me anything. First and most importantly, I do not want anyone giving me any money that they will in any way miss. I've been extremely lucky that a lot of you guys seem extremely kind and willing to give, and that's awesome, but that said, times are tough, and if the money you'd be parting with by donating to my Patreon is something that you would miss in any way, then I want to say very clearly that I do not want it. Basically, if you have a few extra bucks every month and you're looking for something to spend it on, then I welcome it and would appreciate your support more than you know. But that said, if at any point you're like, well, can I swing this? Then as far as I'm concerned, the answer should be no. Don't go spending your money on me if it means you will be missing out on literally anything else you might want or need. Second, I want to say that at this moment in my life, I am fine. I've noticed doing this show that there are a lot of people out there who seem to have genuine concern for me, and while they're probably right to do that in a lot of ways, in this specific aspect of my life, I don't think it's necessary. I am extremely lucky to have an amazing support system in my life, and as it stands now, I'm not in risk of like ever getting to a place where I'm not going to be sure where my next meal is coming from anytime soon. So if you're like, well, I don't want Willie to die, better donate, don't worry, that's not happening yet. Well, like, I guess I could die, but if I do, it won't be from anything that your Patreon membership could have prevented. Still, for as grateful as I am to have it, I'm also past an age in my life where my support system is something that I ever want to be even thinking about relying on for security. And so having a steadier source of income than the one I currently have is very appealing to me. Like, basically, to make this series viable for me long term, I need to be able to make a little bit more money off of it. And the best way for me to do that right now is to start a Patreon. Like, I guess the short way of putting that would be to say, donate because you like the series and want to keep it alive, but don't donate because you like me and want to keep me alive. And then third and finally, one of the things that makes me feel most hinky about starting a Patreon is that I've seen a lot of instances where YouTubers have exploited the relationship that they create with their audiences, and I want to make sure that I'm not doing that in any way. Like, it's genuinely been a joy getting to meet you guys online and hear from you in the comments, and I truly value this whole parasocial relationship thing we've got going on. But that said, at the end of the day, I'm just one guy, and sometimes I might not be able to engage in said relationship to the degree that maybe everyone would hope that I would. Like, don't get me wrong, it's really not that hard to get a hold of me, and I do my best to respond whenever I can. This is my Twitter. If you want to follow me, I reply a lot. Like too much, some might say. But that said, though, I just want to make it clear that while I truly appreciate your donations, I will not like anyone more or less based on whether you donate. Like, if you don't donate, that's fine. I still like you. And if you do donate, thank you so much. But the only things that I can promise you in return are the things I'm about to go over. And as you'll see, it's not a lot. So first and foremost, the thing that I will promise all of you, whether you donate or not, is one video a month. Hopefully, it will be a lot more than that. My goal is usually to do a video every 2 weeks, but that often is very ambitious. In all honesty, they usually take me about 3 weeks to make start to finish, but I still wanted to keep my promise at one a month, because if I'm going to be accepting y'all's money, I'd rather under-promise than over-promise. Like, I don't want to see 3 weeks and have something come up and it takes longer, and then you guys are like, hey Willie, I gave you money, what gives? That said, I still want to make as much ad revenue as possible, so I will be trying to make as many videos as possible. But I do like the idea of giving myself a little bit of leeway on the off chance that my ADHD gets the better of me, or I like what I'm working on and want to take a little more time with it. So one a month feels like a safe promise to me. As for my Patreon tiers, there are going to be 3. The first of those goes for $2 a month. I wanted to make it 1. Patreon told me I should make it 3, so I figured I'd split the difference and make it 2. What that $2 will get you is access to the Patreon, which will grant you early access to episodes, and those episodes will be ad-free. If I can swing it, I'm also going to try and be running polls on there occasionally about what the next episode should be. I have a lot of ideas for videos I want to do and don't always know which ones I should do next, so I'm going to try to occasionally run polls with a bunch of ideas and let you guys vote on them. This will give you guys the opportunity to help me steer the direction of this channel a little bit, and hopefully it will help me make more videos that you guys want to see. The next tier is $5 a month, and that will get you all the things I just said, plus your name listed at the end of my videos. And then the final tier is $10 a month, and that will also get you everything I just said, plus your name listed at the end of the videos, but before the $5 a month people and in a bigger font. I'm not gonna lie, I had a little bit of trouble coming up with ideas for what to give in each of the tiers. And yeah, like I said, you'll notice that there's not a lot being offered, and that's for a couple of reasons. The first being that I'm just one person, so I can't really do much in the way of extra content. And the second is that even if I could, the idea that someone might want to see the things that I make but can't because they can't afford it didn't really sit right with me. So I wanted to make these rewards more like nice little bonuses more than anything. I don't want anyone feeling like they're missing out. And then yeah, that's the top tier because I couldn't think of anything else, because I don't think anyone should be spending more than $10 a month on me. Like, don't get me wrong, if you have the money and want to donate more, I won't stop you, but I don't really want to encourage that. Well, actually, I guess there is technically one more tier up, but it's kind of weird and I don't expect anyone to do it. But for $200, you will sponsor an episode. And what that means is that I will knit you a tile with your initials and sew it into the tapestry back here. I will only be offering this to one person a month. And if any of you do this, it is my hope that you give me $200 and then move down to a lower tier for the next month. Patreon doesn't allow for one-time purchases, but that's what this should be treated like. Also, for the record, it doesn't have to be your initials. It can be any 3 letters. Like, if you want to pay me $200 and make it say ass behind me, I will knit anything. So long as it's not like a slur. Although, truth told, the only 3-letter slur I can think of would actually be kind of funny, but I still probably shouldn't do it. Although that said, if someone named like Frederick Arnold Garrison were to donate, then who am I to deny them the opportunity to see their name in yarn? But yeah, for the record, I don't actually expect anyone to spend $200 on something this dumb, but I wanted to come up with something a little bit cooler to offer, and this was the best I could think of. So yeah, I'm not a very skilled Patreon starter, but yeah, that's my Patreon announcement. Please donate. Thank you. Love, Willie. Alright, I know this video is going on for a very long time, but I do like to have a good shot for my thumbnail. So this is going to be called, I think, like the most boring porno ever made. So I feel like it's going to have like the poster behind me, and so I should be like bored. Like I should be like, It's probably showing my double chin. Maybe I'll like roll my eyes. Brother. What's another? How else do you show bored? Like, maybe I can hide my double chin with like, oh, maybe. Hopefully there's something good in there, but I'm very tired, so there's a good chance that there isn't. Maybe if I just feel like, ugh. This video is way too long. I'm sorry. Goodbye!